Freedom Guy 55 here again. I guess I'm going to try to review a movie that I had just seen and see how it goes. Well, basically, I just seen a movie called Priest. Really, I thought it was actually long and boring and such like that for most part. But anyway, basically what it is that it's this movie that pretty much you have to kind of look at it as kind of an alternate reality. And what it is that there have always been humans, and then there have always been vampires. And these vampires are like these vicious monsters. They don't really have any kind of, eyes, I guess. I haven't seen any eyes on them. But they have like really sharp fangs and really claws that they can just cut people in half. And they're kind of like really big monsters that just move fast. And, they suck your blood and such like that too, or they drink blood, but they can also just combat like just, cutting people's heads off and such like that. And then of course over time they've always fought against each other until the church decided to unleash these priests, or teach these priests how to actually fight against the vampires. So, they wind up actually fighting against the vampires, and they win. And they win the war against them, supposedly. So, anyway, they wind up actually winning the war, and since over time the priests are not needed anymore, so they're kind of disbanded and set into regular society. Their services are not needed, so they wind up actually doing other odd jobs and whatnot. And the city is pretty much run by the church. So it becomes this like huge theocracy with a kind of pro-militarized civilization, I guess. And there's buildings, and kind of just and the whole particular kind of landscape kind of reminds you of like, Blade Runner and what. Anyway, there's also towns outside of this particular type of walled city. And apparently a particular type of place had gotten hit by vampires, and it happened to be the family of one of the priests, which is played by Bettany. Anyway, he winds up getting told by somebody who comes to his apartment that this has actually happened, that there's a vampire attack and whatnot. And so he says that his I believe brother is wounded. So he winds up going to the clergy to try to actually get him to be, reinstated and to go and fight these vampires, but they don't believe him. They said that there's no vampire menace and so on, right? Well, anyway, he winds up actually going against, or of course going against what is classified in this this kind of theocracy, that you go against God if you're going against the church, which is the church that runs this thing, and he's told not to engage outside of the walls. Well, apparently he decides to do so, so he's going against God, and so he fights his way out and takes his bike and leaves the place. Now we're kind of brought into a Mad Max kind of world, and basically he meets a few characters along the way. Also, the other priests are actually reactivated to get Paul Bettany's character back to face justice or whatnot. And one of them is played by Maggie Q. Now, anyway, if you don't know who Maggie Q is, she's the one that plays La Femme Nikita on the CW. She also has played in like Balls of Fire with Christopher Walken in it. She's also played the villain woman in Live Free and Die Hard. Live Free or Die Hard, or whatever it is. Anyway, but basically, we find that we're trying to build. In this movie, we build these certain particular kind of characters, and he's out to, to save his niece that has been kidnapped by these particular kind of other vampires, and we find out that there's this like first human vampire who was once originally a priest. And anyway, I found that throughout this whole movie, and they have to stop him and whatnot because he's built an army to attack the city where Paul Bettany's from. Well, anyway, I found that this movie was a little bit, really extremely drab. I thought it was like really, the pacing was really slow, and I thought that the characters were not really built right. I mean, they didn't actually build upon the story and whatnot of these particular type of people at least really well, especially Paul Bettany's character, who is supposed to be, the one that we were supposed to follow and care more about, and yet it kind of seemed like his past was just like a throwback, like, it was here, it's there. There's some choppy things that we see, like one particular image of his past when he was fighting in the war that was just like, repeated twice. So we don't really know much about him, and we're not really given a really good explanation most of the time. There's only like bits and pieces here and there, but not enough to care about the character. And that is the problem with that particular type of film, especially with also other characters as well. We're just kind of given somewhat of a backstory, but not enough to even care about any of these particular kind of protagonists. And that becomes very, very, very wrong about this film. But I will have to give really very good credit to the special effects, the special effects, the costume design, and the cinematography to this is absolutely beautiful, and it actually complemented the 3D very well. Not very good, because of course I wasn't really paying attention to 3D, but trying to pay attention to the film. The action sequences, really, there's not a lot of them. They're really kind of quick in the beginning, and I was just waiting for the last action sequence, because there's always having to be a big one at the end. But the last action sequence was very, very disappointing, which basically ruined the rest of the action sequences in the movie. Because the last action sequence is against the first human vampire who was once a priest, and he's fighting against Paul Bettany, and it's a repetitive motion over and over and over again. It was just like, he's getting up, he's fighting, and then bang, he gets blown back in slow motion by a fist. And then another time, does the same thing. Over and over again. And then he gets thrown into things, picked up and thrown into things. So there's just really not enough action that really got me into the point where I was actually really thrilled. The only sequence that seems to be good is the kind of this final explosion at the end of it that I thought was the only thing that was really redeemable, but yet not as redeemable as the rest of the particular film. So I just really couldn't like it. As much as anything else, as much as I do like Paul Bettany as an actor, as well as also Maggie Q. And I thought that the acting was really good, but the way that the dialogue and how the actual movie was shot to develop these characters were just so piss poor that I just thought it was too long, it was too boring, and I just really couldn't care about the characters. I thought some of the actual, sequences were chopped up too much, where they'll be on a bike riding, and then they'll stop, they'll have some dialogue, and then they'll wind up seeing something, and then then they'll go into that place, and then they'll have an action sequence that's quick. And some of the scares were good, but it was just really not a very redeeming kind of value. I just really did not find as much as the good cinematography, costume design, and special effects, the rest of the film just falls utterly flat. But, so I find that, to me, Priest is just, it's thumbs down. Just doesn't work. Anyway, I want to know how you thought about this review, and whether or not I would want to do any more, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's it. And thank you for your time, and have a nice day.